Good morning everyone, and welcome to this morning's Family and Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Thursday the 2nd of March 2023. We have a number of agenda items this morning which are annual reports. We'll come into that in just a moment, but we'll start the meeting first of all with any apologies for absence.
I've not received any apologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're then going to work through the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 6. Councillor Dodd, you chaired that meeting, so if you can take this section. We have Reverend Lennox.
Yes, Chair, sorry, the system actually didn't pull your names through. It was my fault. I put you as present as expected on the system, and it should have been in attendance. You are actually recorded on the website. It's just on this printed version that they're not on. We'll make a note of it, though.
Thank you, and well spotted. We then move on to the statutory item, which is the disclosure of members' interests. We all have standing declarations, but is there anything on this morning's agenda papers which anyone wants to declare a particular additional interest on? I'm not seeing any indication around that, so thank you very much for that. We then move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is pages 7 to 16, forward plan of key decisions. Chris Angus is going to take us through that one.
Thanks, Chair. I don't think there's anything on the forward plan that isn't already on the scrutiny work programme. Some of the stuff that is on there will be on the 23-24 scrutiny work programme, which I will share with members at the next meeting.
Thank you very much, Chris. We then move on to the first substantive report, which is a Cabinet report, the Annual Education Report 2021 to 2022. Audrey Kingham's going to be taking that, and then I'll bring in Guy Renner-Thompson, then open it up to questions. And again, just welcome Audrey Kingham in her new role as Director of Children's Services. So Audrey, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. So I present to you this morning the Annual Education and Skills Report for Northumberland, academic year 2021-22. The annual report, I'm providing that to our scrutiny members, sharing the detail of performance across Northumberland for our children, young people and our residents, reminding everyone that this encompasses our post-16 service and the adult education opportunities across Northumberland and, of course, our FE College. This report will highlight the continuing challenges, the legacy, as well as celebrating many achievements for our children and young people reaching beyond academic outcomes. So there is a lot of detail in this report. I'm hoping that members have had an opportunity to go through the report. I'm not going to go through all the full detail in terms of the presentation, but I do want to give you a balanced perspective and ensure that you're clear about what happened last year and actually what we're already starting to do this year moving forward. So in particular, talk about the response and the demonstrable work that's been undertaken to support everyone across the sector and the county. So the committee has recommended 3 recommendations there, to note the education achievements of our children, young people and residents and the ongoing challenges as a legacy of the pandemic. Agree that members provide scrutiny and challenge to the service responses and developments in the report as appropriate. And third, to agree that members receive the digital annual report, and I'm hoping you've clicked into it to have a look at that. So it's the 3rd time we've produced that very visual report, something that I like to use, and actually we use that throughout the year to be able to demonstrate what we've done and where we're going and the directions. It's really good in terms of comparable opportunity. So just talking particularly around the background to this report to give you a little bit more detail, but I've picked out 7 key areas, particularly thinking about the resilience of our young people across last year and also the workforce. You know, it was a continuing year in terms of the global pandemic, although very different to the previous 2 academic years. So that resilience is really important. You will have seen throughout the report, and as you've read that there is much impact and legacy as a result of the pandemic, and that the interventions that have been put into place, the support challenge and the investment is not insignificant across Northumberland. So a lot of work gone in by the coalface, by our colleagues right across the education sector, the whole of the education sector by our partners across there and by our central team across Northumberland as well. You will also note in the report that attendance, behaviour and the consequences of some of the challenges as a result of the pandemic, it continued last year to cause us challenges and indeed does continue this year. But this report is about last academic year, and so there are some specific numbers in the report that I will talk to in a little while, just so that we can all be aware of those. It is really important to talk about the continuing improvement work, because whilst the legacy of COVID is really important, actually our targeted focus and the impact of that for us in Northumberland is the best it's ever been, and I will highlight that shortly. And our continuing commitment to that improvement is there every single day. I've talked a little bit already about the new variants and the challenges that caused. For some of our population, that was even more extreme. So when we talk about our adults out in the community undertaking ESOL lessons, they were particularly vulnerable to one of the new strains and variants last academic year, and that did cause some challenges. So working around that, it got much better as the year went on, but our skills service worked really hard to make sure that they were still able to succeed. And of course, we do talk about an academic year, and I do spend my life talking about academic achievements, but it is much more than academic achievements. So we've got some brilliant stats, and stats are just the hard figures that we see written down, but many of our young people have gone off to their first choice university, they've gone off to apprenticeships, they're now working in industries in Northumberland that have been invested in Northumberland, and that's brilliant, and we want to see much more of that moving forward. And of course, the challenge also has not diminished our ambition. It's certainly not diminished our transition amongst key stages across the schools, or indeed into university, as I've just talked about. But one of the key aspects in this report, and I'm hoping that it's come through, is that we are beginning to see in education skills some of the challenges that Graham often talks about in the social care workforce. So we are really challenged around some of our teaching assistants, support assistants, and actually leadership roles. The last 2 to 3 years have really made individuals think about what their next step in their career is. And as an organisation, that is something we need to think about, how we support the sector to do that and work with our partners to achieve it. So just setting out some highlights, achievements and challenges, and as always, a balanced perspective. This report sets out much to celebrate. I'm hoping you feel it's really honest, and it reports our continuing challenges that focus the work of the sector. Our formal outcomes for children present a mixed picture, as it did nationally in the academic year 2021 and 22. I have said that I'm using 2022 as year zero. It's really difficult to compare it to 2019 given the changes we've been through. So I would expect this time next year I'm able to say, actually the results this year I'm able to compare to 2022, and that starts us as a new baseline, if you like. It's really difficult given the changes, and so we should treat the data with caution. I have used some of the 2019 national averages because I am aware the committee does like some comparison, and I've given you that as a guide, not necessarily as an absolute in terms of that. So we do have, in particular, in early years foundation stage, that we're improving in terms of that. Our good levels of development, we're above the national rate. And indeed, our early years sector in general is outstanding in many of its key features. For our key stage 2 outcomes, these are our formal outcomes, we have declined. Nationally, there is a decline, and Northumberland also follows this picture. That is the same for key stage 4. Our outcomes were just about in 2019 on a par with national average. We were just tipping over the national average. That rate of improvement has slowed, and overall the progress has declined. And then at key stage 5, we've got an improvement. So we've continued to show improvements at that final stage of formal education in terms of the statutory levels. So our attainment and progress at that level has improved. And our, as I noted earlier, our destination rates of first choice have certainly improved. We took that measure in 2019, and we're seeing a marked improvement year on year. I'd like to think that was as a result of some of the investment around careers and the development and the focus, and that's a national focus around careers. But our young people are becoming much more focused and more detailed around their particular choices and routes that they choose. We aim to get that choice much earlier in their school journey to be able to make sure they've got the right basket of qualifications to get them to where they need to be. So as I mentioned earlier in the highlights, our inspection outcomes as at July the 31st, 2022 are the best they've ever been in Northumberland. That's something that the team are particularly proud of, and I know Guy's our lead member for Children's does talk about that an awful lot. So lots to celebrate there, and that's the whole sector. Everybody has really pulled up trees to get to that position. Really good. We have had and continue to have challenging timescales for completion of our statutory education healthcare plan assessments. But what I should say is Northumberland, despite the challenges, we're saying challenging because our ambition and target is really high for us. We're kind of restless in terms of improving all of the time. But we remain above the national average. So for me, it's still not good enough, and our team say it's still not good enough. We want to get better, and we are really striving to do that. I thought the next stat, and there was a lot of detail in this report, and so I don't expect you to ask all of the detail. However, I thought the next one, given some of the challenges, was a really key stat. So 44.6% increase in referrals for support into our inclusive education services. And I'll talk a little more around that when we move on. For fact scrutiny, that's something that you kind of go, yeah, that makes sense, because we talk about that a lot, the challenges and what we're doing about it. The legacy COVID impact is very visible. We are seeing that. Our exclusions are returning back to 2017 levels. And in particular, Councillor Swinburne sat here today will recall the task and finish group that was focused. It's very different. So that was a particular aspect. Actually, this work now needs to have a different focus, but still the same challenges. Much work is going on to continue our focus and support, and you'll see some of the text that's underneath the table. You'll see the comparative data. I've tried to give you, I think, the last 5 or 6 years worth of exclusion, so you've got that full picture. And you can see that the kind of wave, if you like, in terms of it goes down, but then you see that rise again. But I think it's important to see what we have done, and that's we as a sector. I'm talking about schools involved in this as well, particularly around focusing on those who are really most vulnerable, those who may be at risk of not achieving their education attainment and outcomes. And you will see in some of the text there's some real detail and then some success around some of the inclusion panel work, ensuring that young people are placed in a more appropriate route. First time, we're getting better at that, and that has helped them to get their educational attainment and to be able to move on. 97,143 vouchers provided to families last year, 4.3 million in value with a 95% redemption rate. These are the vouchers that are provided to our eligible free school meal families across the holiday periods, and we've just agreed to increase the rate for the Easter rate this coming up next holiday as well. So some significant stats in terms of that. And the HUG vouchers is what we use in Northumberland. That's been exceptionally used as a national best practice example. Significant development of our education estate. We've improved the facilities in which our children set out their ambitions, and you'll see an awful lot of that into the documentation. So the report does give you a flavour of that. It would be remiss, particularly given this time of year, that I don't mention the Homes for Ukraine. Over 200 pupils placed in our schools last academic year. We were really working very closely with all of the families that arrived, and we sought out their skills. We supported a number to use their professional skills and support them into work in the region and really make them feel like part of that community. But actually, we've also harnessed their education skills. So we had some teachers arrive, we had some support assistants arrive, and they've done a marvellous job integration, working with our children in schools, but also significantly within our communities as well. Our Northumberland Skills, our post-16 service achievement rate, 91.9%. That's really good for that's a post-16 further education rate. and the service continues to self-assess as good ahead of Ofsted inspection, with some outstanding aspects, I would have to say, in terms of that work. Reverend Lennox will be very pleased with the next one, because our English and mathematics rates in that post-16 adult learning service have improved and are now above national rates. And I know for the last 2 to 3 years we've talked about that. We saw a dip, but that has come back up again. So really pleased to report that. NEET figures for all England, we were above that in Northumberland at the end of July. However, our SEN NEET was above the national rate. So the response in terms of that has been about developing new curriculum, turning on a pin very, very fast, and getting some curriculum that is very well pastorally supported to ensure that those young people feel secure, safe, most importantly that their parents and carers are confident that they're not going into a school environment, they're moving into an environment where they're learning a skill that will help them to move into a job. And the skills service have doubled the numbers of learners this academic year. So that's as a direct result of that number in July, the number that started in September, and also in January just gone, have doubled. So really good curriculum development to be able to support their particular needs. Project choice. You will remember that Scrutiny agreed the project choice proposals, I think in 2020. We went through that process, we worked with NHS England, and we are now taking that onto a Northumberland model. So some amazing stories, something that the team are really, really proud of, and we expect to continue that and expand that further. That's another opportunity where we support that SEN community, particularly at post-16, moving into training and employment and apprenticeships more medium term. And as you know, I've committed to make sure that we do much more of that, and we are well ahead of the national performance rate in a short space of time. I wanted to mention our education development, because that is significant in terms of the work that has supported us across schools. It has linked education and industry in Northumberland. You have seen reports through around Global Bridge and endorsed that. We open the Blythe Welding facility in the next 2 weeks, so we'll occupy the classrooms. That would be a brilliant site to be able to deliver a scrutiny from, so that you can see what's there, how we're addressing that shortage. It's brilliant because it meets the needs of young people who are really challenged, particularly some of those young individuals who are finding it difficult to regulate within a 5-day school environment. Actually, that blend of academic and vocational development, as well as some skill provision, really gives them a much better balance, and we're able to see them succeed. My ideal is that they come in one door and do the training, and 6-9 months later they go out another door and into a job on the Port of Blythe. This is co-located with Port of Blythe, and so a brilliant opportunity of education and industry partnership in action. And last facts, we had our virtual school. So you've got a whole section in my report that's relative to virtual school, but you had that full report the last time. So many highlights in there, and I've just not gone through the detail for you in terms of that. I think when I sat here 2 years ago, David and I had done some work around the 12 education priorities. We looked at where we were post-COVID and said, okay, we need to refresh where we are, what our key priorities are and where we're going, and actually focus the work of everybody. My view is they're the 12 priorities that drive what we do. They're sector-led, so it isn't just about us as a team deciding this. We have now refreshed those priorities. 2022, we're talking different language, we've moved on. We've absolutely filtered them down to 6 priorities, so we now have 6 areas of key focus. Sector-led, so these have been shaped by our peers across this sector, really, really focused. They represent the views, the aims and the aspirations for all of our children, young people and our adults in Northumberland. We want them to do better, we want them to do more, and it really, really focuses. They are the back page in the digital report, and I have put them into the annual education report as well. And that summarises and completes my overview for the annual Education and Skills Report. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. I want to bring in Guy Renner-Thompson now.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a report that everyone at Northumberland County Council could be immensely proud of. It shows the work we've done over the last year, and it really focuses in on our three corporate priorities of economic growth, inequalities, and value for money. Audrey's been through this. I'm not going to just repeat exactly what Audrey said. She's done a great job of summarising the report. But we as an administration have been very clear with the Children's Services team what we want to achieve. We want to achieve a good education and jobs for those people to go into once they leave our education, because the two are inexorably interlinked. You can't have one without the other, or it's pointless having one without the other. To that end, that's why we've really put a focus on our school improvement team. And you know, I keep going on about it, and Glenn keeps going on about it, but the more children that come through good or outstanding schools, that will in turn follow through with better GCSE, A-level results and other post-16 qualifications. And that will enable them to get into a world of work, get a good job, and get out of any poverty or financial struggles they're in. We're really trying to build up the population of Northumberland to be a well-educated, well-financed and happy people. We want people to be happy. What we've done in the school holidays with the hug vouchers, as Audrey said, has been copied across the UK. We didn't have to do that. It was our choice to do that, but we felt it was the right thing to do, and that's something we'll keep monitoring as we go forward through the next few years and see what financial support we can get. And the work that's going on in our SEN provision continues, something I'm incredibly proud of. As we've never done this before, we've never sat down and done a report on where the need is, how we can better improve the offer we have. We're building new special schools, and today, or in the last few hours, the government has announced even more money to try and streamline the EHCP process and put some more money into funding some more special schools. So that's something we really want to grasp the nettle on, and it's something we could all be proud of, because we must be judged by how we look after the weakest in our society. And those SEN pupils, we really need to put our arms around them and give them the same opportunities as everyone else. So I welcome everyone's comments and questions on the report.
Thank you, Guy. Right, questions. So I'll go to Trevor Thorne, and then Councillor Dale, and I'll take some more.
Yes, well, my first question was about the fixed-term exclusions. You know, very high, Audrey, aren't they? 21, 22 at sort of over 4,000. And I was just wondering, you know, what we're doing to try and sort of combat that figure, keep that down. It's, you know, an exclusion. People are out of school and they're not being educated, and I do worry about that number creeping up.
Thank you, Councillor Thorne. My worry is ahead of yours. So we're on this daily. We work with the head teachers. Clearly, I talked about, you know, being at the coalface and this challenge, and it's changing behaviour. So you will see nationally that this is often being reported as an increase in SEN. My own professional view is it's not directly related to SEN, it's different behaviours that we're seeing, some of which are COVID legacy. Now that is really difficult for some children, so we're seeing really school-based avoidance, you know, that anxiety levels increasing all of the time. So our education psychologists, our low incident team, for example, you'll see some detail in there. They are working really closely with schools and trying where, I'm going to say where we have a hotspot, to really hone in and wrap around the school and see what needs to be done. School infrastructures are changing, so they are looking at very different roles across school to be able to support growing needs of children. They are seeing this much more. And so what you might have seen as a school infrastructure 5 or 6 years ago, it's likely to look very different today, just because of the roles that are needed. They're buying in additional services. We are working really closely with health to be able to support and try and expedite referrals into some of the health services that are required. And that's our role as an authority, to really help and do that strategic partnership with health and help them understand what our key priorities are. And really, you know, David and I spend a huge amount of time listening to head teachers, listening to SENCOs, Mike, who leads our SEN, and Sue, who leads our school organisation. The inclusion team rests within Sue's team. We've expanded that team, almost doubled it in size as a result of some of the COVID work, because actually they deal with individuals on a daily basis. And we are trying to get them back into school as quickly as possibly can. Working with schools to try and prevent that where it's possible, but you know, there are many occasions when that's not possible, and we see that in the stats that we've got here, and we follow through with that as quickly as we can to support children and their families where we can. So Jane at the last meeting particularly talked about attendance and all the work that's done around attendance, and the team, our welfare officers working with parents and schools and relationships. More of that, and we're constantly looking to see what else is there that we can do. Quite often it's bespoke in different areas that we see, but we also work with our early help, so you know, using our social care team. We've got 4 pilot schools where we've done team around the school, and that has very much helped, but we're seeing rising, changing challenges, and we'll do much more of that moving forward.
Chairman, my other little question was, I was wondering, our partnership work with the Royal Grammar School, obviously, which I'm a governor of, I was wondering, was that having an impact? You know, obviously from the school's point of view, I do hear they're out in Northumberland working with schools, and I'm just wondering, you know, if we are seeing any benefit from that.
Without doubt, partnership work in general expands the opportunities. It helps some schools to see how they do things differently, not necessarily take exactly how it's done at RGS or a particular partner and use it, but they see it and think, actually, that would be helpful for us, but perhaps we would do it in this way. So what it does is that, you know, that external perspective helps everybody to open their eyes and understand, actually, that's a different route we could take. We'll try that. And I would generally say that our schools are very open, both to what is out there, what's available, and can we do something to improve this. I need to clearly say that whilst we're exercised by the rates, so are schools, so are all our professionals across the school sector.
Thank you. We've got 4 speakers so far. They'll take them in order. Councillor Dale, Mr Hodgson, Mark Swinburne and Paul Rickards. So Councillor Dale first.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for a very good report. There's some really good outcomes in here, and obviously everybody's been working very hard. It's just 1 or 2 things I would like to ask and make a comment on. Just so I know, just a quick one, but you distributed 97,143 vouchers. How many families, I think, would I like to know, is how many families were the vouchers given to? I don't know, and I think that would be useful. You don't have to say now, but I think it would be useful, because you can say a number, but actually what we want to know is how many families were actually able to apply.
I'll definitely get that for you.
Yeah, and to make a difference, because that goes into the inequality work we're doing, looking forward, because I think that's something that's useful to use. The other thing is the council at the present time, but there's really a big difference between the delivery of education throughout the whole of Northumberland. So we do have a lot of academies now, which are various forms, etc. And we have to say, and I have to say, obviously, a big thank you to the academies, and some of them are not working with the county council because they have their own school improvement people. They have all kinds of things that come in. So I have to say thank you to them, because they are actually very much part of working with the county, because they're delivering on behalf of the people of Northumberland a good education. So I have to say that maybe we need a little bit more interaction about differentiating between those that are maintained and those which are academies, because it gives us a good grip on how academies are working. And as somebody who started in that move over, I just feel I would like more information about how things are moving over, how things are improving and where they're improving. And also you've got the changes between the first schools and becoming primaries, etc. All these changes, which do have an impact on our children's education over that period. So that would be helpful to have, because I think I'm very much a detail person, so that would help me take a bigger picture. And the other thing, just to say, we've got over 1,200 people sat A levels achieving an average grade of B. And, you know, we all know with when we're doing exams and things like that, we have different cohorts, and the cohorts change annually. And it all depends, you know, what the cohort of that year is, as to sometimes in respect of the actual outcomes to the exam results. So what I would really like, which is a little bit of a concern, what I would like to see is it's an average of B. What is the bottom, medium, or what's the top? Because somebody, you know, your percentages can be changed by quite a few people who can get, or a lot of people who can get really high levels, and that undermines the real people where we're not actually attaining very high levels, or levels that maybe be acceptable to university. So I'd like to see that, because that to me is the challenge. It's not the top, it's the bottom. So if I could have more information around that, because that's where we really need, as you were saying earlier on, actually to make an impact if we're going to make a change to people's lives.
So if we can pick up on those 2 points, then one was the geographic breakdown of those A-level results. So in a sense,
No,
which grade, yeah, grades. And the second one was around the joint working that we currently do with academies.
Yeah,
so
I was going to respond to both. So firstly, with regard to academies, so we work along, I don't think we've got any academies that we don't work alongside really closely and have good working relationships. I would say, Councillor Dale, that a number of our academies, we share school improvement. So we use their school improvement advisors, and they use our team as well. So I haven't been very specific, because actually I feel like we've moved on from a differentiation between academies and maintained, and I've definitely tried to talk about all of our children. And you know my view that all of our children should be taught in a very good school, very well by great leaders across the county. And so I've not used that, because we have very good working relationships, and we do share that between us. But there's no reason why I couldn't provide you some more detail outside the meeting to support that, should you wish it.
Thank you. I mean, it is because of my interest in actually the growth of the academisation through the government, and to see, you know, how it works and how it isn't working, and what is because we all want improvement. And I do work with academies, and, you know, they vary, and we've done tremendous work in careers things. So now it's gone up to gold level, and it's a real impact. It's got nothing to do with the county council. However, it's a lot to do with the children, and we can share information and be part of that sharing. It would be absolutely brilliant.
And I'll definitely get you the higher and lower, the each end of the grades for A levels. That's not an issue. I can get that for you. Thank you.
Guy, did you want to comment on this particular point?
Yeah, just very briefly. Okay. It's a very good point worth making, because I'm very acutely aware that I shouldn't sit here and take credit for all this improving Ofsted outcomes if it didn't have anything to do with the council. So I've been very clear in asking David and the other school improvement team, the majority of schools which have improved have had council involvement, and therefore I feel happy saying that Northumberland County Council has had part of that. Where if that wasn't the case in the academies, and we weren't helping the academies, I wouldn't be able to sit here and take credit for some of that, but we do.
Thank you, Guy. Now moving on to the rest of the speakers, I've got Mr. Hodgson.
Yeah, thanks. I can say that you're right. There's some real positives, and I think it's fantastic that so many children now are in good or outstanding schools in Northumberland. I think that's a real high watermark, so brilliant, well done. Just picking up on a few points. First of all, it's interesting when you look at the Key Stage 2, and you say it's, you know, we're lagging behind national and that. And the COVID recovery appears to be slower in Northumberland than across England. And that's just a question of why you think that is. And then also as well, it's ironic, isn't it, that Progress 8 is the only positive score is in London. And this is the point we've been making, that thanks to £1 billion of investment, that's what they get. So, you know, it's, if that's a stick to hit us with, you could turn around and say, well, give us the money and we can deliver a positive score post-COVID as well. So there's that one. The other things as well is about the apprenticeship challenge. You say apprenticeships continue to be a challenge. And I think that Blythe classroom sounds absolutely fantastic. And to me, that should be something that we, if we possibly could, to roll out across the county, because obviously Blythe is not easy to get to if you live in Hexham or if you live in Berwick. So again, that idea, that principle of welding, well, pardon the pun, of education and industry, then you really are, I think, on a winner, because a lot of children, and they're in mainstream, they're not necessarily the ones who find mainstream difficult, but the ones that don't necessarily want to go on through the academic route. This is the sort of thing. And this model, as I've said before, works absolutely fantastic in Europe. This is a European model. And if we can develop that and become a leader in this, I think that would be absolutely fantastic for Northumberland. But I think that's brilliant. Well done. And the last 2 points, just picking up the attendance. And what you've got is you say things like there are, if you like, reasons for it. But have we drilled down into, is it too simple to say it's COVID legacy for attendance? Because again, if you look at some of the local authorities, the city ones, North Tyneside, a lot of those schools will have huge welfare teams who really are able to go around those families that are potentially one's going to miss out on attendance. Whereas in Northumberland, possibly because of finance, has not got the same depth of welfare teams, and as a result of that, can't necessarily bring those kids back into school as easily as, say, some of the schools in Newcastle or Sunderland or North Tyneside. Is that possibly an issue? And then finally, the permanent exclusions. And again, what you've said there is we're looking at possible alternatives. But again, it comes back down to finance, doesn't it? I mean, it costs a lot of money for alternative education or alternative provision. Is that a barrier to Northumberland schools that we simply cannot afford to pay, or it's not as local? Again, if you're in Newcastle or if you're in Sunderland, that alternative provision is much nearer and more accessible. Are we a victim of that? Anyway, they're the points.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Hodgson. I'll try and give you responses to all of them. I hope I've got them all down.
Yeah.
So in terms of particularly Key Stage 2 and COVID, what we do know is that is certainly a northeastern issue.
Right.
So we're not alone. It's not a Northumberland, just the north.
Right.
If you remember the IPPR report, the Child of the North, that talked particularly about the deficits and challenges. So we are seeing much more of that. Collectively as a region, we are doing a lot together. So if I look at what the early years team do, so if you look at Northumberland, our early years across the board is just about outstanding at every aspect.
Right.
Actually, we've got a brilliant early years passport that we're now sharing with Northumberland and Newcastle. I'm hoping as part of the North East Mayoral Combined Authority, NEMCA, that will over time become much broader and much wider. They're the different tools that will help us to make this difference and improvement and start to see that coming through. Clearly, for our Key Stage 2, that's a legacy of children who missed out for a couple of years. So their first formal assessment was seeing a big dip. Given that the wider performance for us across Northumberland is outstanding, that's something that stands out from our Key Stage 2 stats. You're absolutely right around London and the investment that was given to London, and if Councillor Daly as chair would be given the opportunity to talk about the education challenge that he has championed as part of the devolution deal. And we hope as part of the new Devo deal, the Minded 2 deal, that we will be able to develop some more work around that, and we're asking for further money again. I agree around Blythe. That's why we've done it. It's our blueprint. We're doing a number of things, and just very quickly to say that we have Tharsis and Blythe is our first corporate parent in terms of industry, and they're our blueprint for that. Northumberland County Council has a major employer forum where it brings all the employers together, and we're challenging all of those employers to commit to the corporate parent challenge, so leading on work that Graham and his team are doing. So we want them all to do that. We want our children who have the greatest challenges to get some narrowness of that disadvantage in terms of where their next steps may be. And if we can help them through training and get a job much closer to home, then we're doing the right thing in terms of that. So I also talk about Blythe, but I talk about Berwick and I talk about Bellingham. Them are 3 Bs in the county, and making sure that if I'm looking at that, I make sure, so what am I doing in Berwick and what am I doing in Bellingham? So geographically, we are stretching that out and very conscious of some skill work in the West. Attendance, I think we have pretty strong attendance teams. So there is Jane, who was here the last time. We have a lot of education welfare officers, and in fact I think we've just increased that cohort, particularly around some of the stats that we're looking at. And then, as I talked earlier, Sue's inclusion team focusing particularly around 6-day provision, making sure we get children into that provision as quickly as possible. Our challenge around the PECs, if I'm honest, is about sufficiency of placements. So I'm starting to use the same language that we use in children's social care. It is not necessarily about that it's expensive, because actually it's none of it's cheap. You know, there is no cheap education route in any way, shape, and nor should there be, because actually our children should get the best. But it is really challenging to be able to get the provision in the locality. So we do often have to have children travelling. I'm trying not to increase the climate footprint and the carbon footprint in Northumberland. It is one of our pledges to meet needs much closer to home. And that is a continual conversation that we have around what's the alternative needs. Just yesterday, we were working with North Tyneside around how we're able to use some of our children on the borders. It's actually closer for them to go over to North Tyneside than it is to come up to something further north. So partnership working that we talked about earlier is ever more important.
Thank you for that. So the next 3 speakers I have are Mark Swinburne, Paul Rickard, and then Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad you got the name right for the minutes there, because it keeps cropping up wrong. Mr Hodgson's mentioned a few of the things that I wanted to raise, but firstly, Audrey, thank you for the report. It covers such a broad depth of the education, and despite the impacts of COVID, we're in a much better situation than we were a few years ago with regard to standards and results that we're achieving. But firstly, exclusions. So thanks for the name drop earlier on. And I can see that, yes, there's an increase, but I also see the differences in the data in there. So previously, we had a lot of repeat occurrences, and we had a lot of failures in what we were doing in school placements and stuff like that, which weren't working. And that's not the case now. It's not the same people happening again. It's not the failures. It's different occurrences. So whereas we've reduced one side, obviously we need to shift the focus on how we approach it, and I'm quite confident that that's what you're looking at. But it's still disappointing to see the results on the number of those on EHC plans being excluded, and this is a repeat thing that happens over again. But when we look at exclusions, we know from the previous reports that these are quite area specific. We've seen that. And I can't help but think, and I'm sure this is something you've either looked into or will look into, are these areas linked to the increase in the EHC plans or increased in the attendance problem areas? So could it be that where we've got problems with exclusions, we also have increases in attendance problems in those areas, increases in EHCPs in those areas? And I'm just curious if there's those little nests of problems that might run concurrently.
It's an interesting question. It's a really good question, actually, and I'm not sure I've got the direct answer. David might be able to know a little bit more. But what is interesting is we are producing what we are calling an inclusion dashboard that will start to publish for all of our head teachers so that they can see the inclusion challenges for all of our schools around the county. As part of the green paper that's out for SEND and AP, that is one of the recommendations, not yet a white paper. Northumberland were already doing this. So there's nothing in that green paper that we hadn't already got in train or had conversations about, not yet established. And that inclusion dashboard, I think, will be something that's owned and understood. It'll clearly be available, so people will be able to see it. And that may help to I guess, increase the rate of change and conversation that takes place. I think David and I are meeting with head teachers around this next week. We have an early breakfast meeting to talk about inclusion and the challenges that we have as an authority, our statutory responsibility, and the challenges that they have on a daily basis in the school. So I'm happy to come back and talk a little more about that once we're further. I don't know whether you know if there's any relationship with attendance and EHCP. I think it might be a guess for us at the moment, but we will have a look at it.
Yeah, I mean, there are more learners with the EHC plans, so as a result, I suppose there might be, as there is a higher population, the fact that there are more EHCP learners that are either dropping in attendance or I think it was the fixed term exclusions you were talking about, the numbers are likely to come through stronger. What I would say is the analysis of the fixed term exclusions starts with any of our more vulnerable learners, so disadvantaged learners and learners with special educational needs. And I would suggest that one of the things you mentioned about it not being as many repeat, the same learner getting repeated temporary exclusions, that's related to the fact that when there is one that flags up as a disadvantaged learner or as a learner with a special educational need, that the action and the intervention to prevent that happening again goes in. But it is also a reflection of some of the things we've talked about before, in the pressure, the increased demand, and the challenges, therefore, in meeting the needs of those learners. And when needs aren't met, often that is displayed in behaviours which would be typical of an exclusion. And we've got to try and continue to square that circle to go, this is a communication method by a learner with special educational needs, and actually isn't something that would warrant an exclusion, but would warrant further resources. And that's what we're trying to say to a lot of schools responding to this as well at the moment, in terms of rather than them saying, we've got to a particular point we're really struggling to meet the needs of this learner, or we can't meet the needs of this learner, we're trying to turn that around and say, no, tell us the resources that you require in order to meet the needs of this learner. And actually we are getting some significant success in that. We're increasing, say, for example, the value of some top-ups for learners with the EHC plans, and also putting in additional support through our inclusion panel to better maintain the needs for those learners that might be cropping up in some of the data we've got. There's a swift response, and from the data it looks like less repeats of the same thing happening again, but we're not there yet.
Thank you, because it's just an understanding that I think we need to get across that these people with these plans, they're not weak, they just don't conform to the standard learning that we have been used to providing. They just need a different approach to education, and we need to provide that different approach in a different way. and that's what I need to get across. So I've got a few more things here as well. We've got down the HCP completion timescale, went from 92% down to 68, which is still above the national average. Now, I assume that that drop is just down to the significant volume increase, and I know we're going to be doing more work on that. The fall in reading and writing here and nationally, any ideas as to why? You know, could that be down to attendance as well? I'm not sure. And one more thing Mr Hodgson mentioned about the apprenticeship route, which has been highlighted in Blythe, which is absolutely fantastic, and I agree it should be spread around the whole of Northumberland. However, a plug here for Cramlington, 25% of Cramlington is an industrial area, and although I see the odd little snippet in the media, thank you, about, you know, little companies who are expanding, because 25% of Cramlington is an industrial area, we're a significant cash input into Northumberland, and I would really love to see an approach into Cramlington similar to what we're seeing in Blythe. And I know we don't get the same cash injection because of, you know, Blythe getting that big cash input, but Cramlington itself generates a significant income into Northumberland. So, you know, can we get into Cramlington and do that big apprenticeship training thing as well with some of the huge companies and the smaller companies there as well, because I think we're really missing a trick there. Thanks.
Thank you. So if I can now move on to Paul Rickard and then Councillor Ball.
Thanks, Chair. I think I welcome the report, and I think it makes great reading for the county, especially when you do put it to compare towards Newcastle and to North Tyneside. And there are so many similarities, but Audrey, you touched on this earlier in your conversation, and I just wonder if there's a chance to hear more about the actual activity that goes on to support inequality, to support recovery and what's going on, because we hear a lot of the outputs, but I just wonder if it's useful for the committee to hear, so what is the actual activity that goes on to support that work? Because you touched on it before, and I think there's an enormous amount that goes on. I see it because I'm in and out of 107 schools every day and seeing it from that side, but there'll be members of the committee who won't see that, and I just think given that opportunity and presentation, whatever it is, doesn't have to be huge, but just whereby we can see that, and also people watch this, and I'm sure they'll want to hear exactly what is it that goes on to support that.
So
Yeah,
I think
to
that
do
would be a
that.
good opportunity for us to actually have that as a substantive item at a future committee. That's a very good point. So if we could pick that up as an action, please. So that's a good call. Thank you.
Chair, I'd recommend that we do that as a almost a cross service, where because actually it's not just the work that we do, so it would bring together the inequalities for us and show the, you know, the referrals. I'd include fire and rescue in terms of that and some of the work we do there as well, so happy to do that.
I do think, Chair, there's an unintended consequence of the two of you working so closely together recently. You can almost see that divides have gone. Not that I'm saying that they were there in the first place to that degree, but it feels like there's a more joined-up approach now to this in terms of social care, education and other services, and I just wonder, it would be good to hear and understand where that is, if that could be presented to us, because I think that, again, sometimes you've got to fly your own flag and show actually what you're doing, and it gets lost in translation sometimes. We get a great report, but actually service providers given the opportunity to say this is what we do.
Yep, happy to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. And like everybody else, I'll welcome the report, but obviously this is scrutiny. So, page 21, 811, reading fell by 2.4, writing's down 12.8 and maths down 11.8. What we're doing to make sure them figures start going the other way around, especially when we're saying the importance and the jobs that we're looking at are engineering based, and without your basics, reading, writing, you're going to struggle later in life. So what we're going to do there. Next point, page 25, about the Atkinson House move. Great. Obviously, we are moving kids around the county for these schools, but not all is rosy in the garden there, and I would like to see a little bit more detail about what's the learning outcomes for us on that move and what we're going to do better next time, because there was issues. So I would like a little bit more detail with that. Page 27, 11.11, the fixed term exclusions that rose sharply, and about anxiety. I have banged on about youth services and them soft touches within, like in schools, somebody that is there, like make sure that you're okay. And I think we need a plan as well, so not just them crisis point interventions when people are showing signs of either not attending school or things are going really wrong. I think we need to get something back into the schools somehow, and we need to find money for that. I welcome the engagement and working with industry, but I do have concerns that schools don't have the power and the staffing to be able to work with young people to get them workplace ready. Things like work experience and things like that, just they don't happen as much as what they used to. And I think that actually being in a workplace is a very important part. And I do worry as well, if we're going to be led by business with regards to education, absolutely amazing that people are getting hands-on experience, but actually what about entry requirements and the kids that may not have a GCSE A to C, but actually we're hand-picking because they're going into the industries, the best of the best? What happens with the kids that haven't got that academic achievement, that may not be the polished article, that may struggle, that need that little bit extra support, and that exclusion of things like needing the right kit to do the course, needing to travel across the county because that's the only place that does it. I've had in my ward recently somebody that couldn't afford the boots to be able to do a course. Obviously there's ways to work around that, but unless you know where to go in that support, there is going to be them exclusions if it's going to be business led, because obviously business, they're there to make money, not to make sure that the kid from Rosalind Street gets on and does okay. Thank you.
I'll try and get all of those for you. I might have to work backwards. I do the skills one last that you just talked about there, because actually, for us, the big aspect around what we talked around with Blythe and all of our skills sites, because not just Blythe, we've got 9 sites around the county in every geographical area, is about teaching skills, knowledge and behaviours so that we are getting everybody work ready. Schools no longer have a statutory duty around work experience, but they do have a statutory duty around careers guidance. So all of our secondaries have careers specialists within their infrastructure, and we work really closely with them. You'll remember we've taken, we took Global Bridge through this Scrutiny Committee in terms of a digital platform as a result of COVID, and we're seeing some significant shift and change, some great partnerships with schools emerging around industry, so we need to just do much, much more of that. In relation to, I'm going to say individual circumstances, if they're on skills courses, all skills providers have a student support fund as part of their funding grant. So that should be really clear to everybody, whoever they are, when they enrol into a post-16 provider, if it's a college, an apprenticeship provider, training provider, or Northumberland Skills, that there are accessible routes to be able to support those. There should not be gaps. There are travel funds for travel to learn. And there are kit funds that can be a uniform, it can be boots. If it's a health and safety requirement, that should be provided by the provider. So hopefully that's that one. Just thinking about roles in school, can I refer back to what I said earlier, just about the school infrastructures? They're changing. Is that me? Sorry. Yeah. I could feel the eyes coming over from there. The changing infrastructure, schools are changing their roles and they're needing to change the roles of staffing to be able to be much more supportive. A different focus rather than necessarily teacher. There might be 2 or 3 support staff there. A number of schools have put, some of our teams from Early Help are based in schools. They're working alongside. Our social workers are part of the partnership. They're there as a key contact. So we've got some advice in there. But I do think schools are changing dramatically. The roles within what you would have seen 5 or 6 years ago, we're not seeing now. They're definitely changing. I'm not saying we're there yet because I think this is going to continue for some while. And I think we'll be moving with this for a little while to go. Was the other one reading, writing and early years? Do you want to pick that up around what the early years team is doing, and particularly Claire with the school improvement?
Yeah, the biggest influence on academic outcomes is the leadership and the culture within the school or setting. Doesn't matter if we're looking at early years, looking at a primary school, first school, middle school. Doesn't matter whether it says academy on the door. It doesn't matter whether it's a church school and so on and so forth. All of those things have their strengths and their elements. But the absolute core focus, schools that improve on their outcomes, schools that make recovery possibly from previous prior Ofsted outcomes, all the evidence directly points to a change or a development in leadership, and leadership at possibly at multiple levels as well, not just at the top, to impact on those academic outcomes, to improve the quality of the curriculum that's being delivered for learners, to ensure that learners have reasonable adjustments in place for them to meet their needs, whatever they are, so that the barriers to their learning can be overcome, removed, and that's not just about education, health, social care, working together. So it was good that Mr. Rickard recognised some strengthening in that area, because I think that will support outcomes going forwards. The North East did stand out, not just Northumberland, but the North East itself did stand out in terms of academic outcomes for the end of last year against the rest of the country. And I think if we could, I can point to a number of areas in which we know we need to improve. Each individual school and in their action plans will point directly to the areas that they need to improve on. If they have the right leaders in place, then those action plans will actually have a full impact on those learners and the results will improve. The reason why the North East hasn't done as well in the last set of academic results as the rest of the country, I'm not sure if there is a silver bullet on that. I do think there's a lot of good people doing a lot of hard thinking about what the reasons for that might be. And probably with these sorts of issues, which are very complex, is that there's several things, not just one thing that go on. But to refer back to my first point, whatever the several things are that are the challenges, either in individual schools or in a partnership or across the whole of Northumberland, the solution is the appropriate leaders having the resources as well, of course, to impact on individual learners in the classroom. That's what makes the real difference.
Can we just make sure that it's not, with some of the roles within schools and the restructures and stuff, it doesn't end up just smoke and mirrors as well, that say, for example, Graham, suddenly not only are you the teacher, you are the person that is responsible for mental health, well-being, after-school support clubs, etc. And it's a tick box exercise, because obviously schools are under massive funding pressures, and just giving somebody a half-day course and a title doesn't mean that the kids are actually getting the support and help that they need as well. So making sure that it is meaningful within the schools, because we can give somebody a title or a role it's in addition to what they already do, or actually when you need somebody to help you with your careers guidance or mental health support or there's family breakdowns in relationships, having a 5-minute chat with your teacher sometimes doesn't cut the mustard. So being able to make sure we've got that meaningful support in schools as well. Thank you.
Audrey, I'll quickly bring in Mr. Hodgson. I'm going to bring you in as the final. I know you want to make a point because I'm keen to make progress on this.
Just to follow up there, David, this cohort obviously transferred predominantly to secondary school in September 22. 6 months now into their first year there. What data have you got which shows that they've made or on the road to making a good recovery and up to speed for being secondary ready? Have we got any data yet? Or did you ask for data, put it that way?
Individual schools will be tracking the progress of the learners. The analysis of the sorts of progress that individual schools are making, our main source of data for that is through our school improvement partner visits. Now we do, the school improvement team do work with the majority of schools in Northumberland, but not all of them. So we'll have a review of our school improvement partner reports. Could give us a description of the picture. And we certainly look into that as the year progresses, if that be something you'd like us to come back to.
Right, so Audrey, just quickly bring you in if I can, and then we'll draw this to a close.
Thank you, Chair. Just to quickly respond to Councillor Boss, I'm hoping if we do that substantive item we've talked about, that will help to see, because the answer is it's a basket of things that support school from our perspective. And just a reminder that we devolve responsibility of leadership to the school, so it is the head teacher and the chair of governors' responsibility in there. We then wrap around that. They may buy some service, there may be some traded service, but actually we provide an awful lot of wraparound that's not a traded service, and I'm hoping we do that presentation, you'll see that and it'll bring it to life.
Thank you. Right, so I think we've had a pretty clear discussion on this. As you can see, there are three things that we've been asked to do, because this is going to Cabinet on the 14th of March. So we've been asked to note the education achievements. I think we've done that, and we've had discussion on it. We've discussed the legacy of the pandemic. Agree that members have provided scrutiny and challenge to this. So I'm going to get Chris to write something up, and there's something which I want to put to the committee before Chris writes that up, and that we receive and review the annual digital report. So I think we've covered off that. What I want to do just very quickly is just make a suggestion which I'm putting to you as part of a recommendation that we put to Cabinet. Because as Mr. Hodgson's rightly pointed out and has been alluded to by many speakers, there is a great differential between the North and South. It's been historic. It's gone on for years. London had its education challenge, which was that multi-million-pound investment, which by any measure has had a demonstrable impact on the grades between those in some inner London areas, which by any measure you'd probably say, crikey, how can anyone achieve there? But they're actually achieving more than some of our young people in some more affluent areas of the northeast. When I was involved in the Combined Authority, it was an offer that was put to us by government to have an education challenge. I worked my backside off, if I can say that word, as did many other officers, to try to push that through. It never quite got there. We got variations of it, and we had a lot of investment which came in additional, but it wasn't wrapped within an education challenge. We now have a new Combined Authority being set up, minded to. So I'd like a recommendation, if you're agreeable to this, that in the report going to Cabinet on the 14th, that this committee asks the Leader of the Council to continue the fight to develop an education challenge for what will be the new North East Combined Authority, mayoral authority, and that this comes with additional monies to target some of the challenges that we have in our region. I think it is essential that when you see it works in London, there's no reason why we shouldn't have it as well. So I just wonder if that would gather support from the committee. Councillor Dale.
Can I just, absolutely fine, I think that's great. I think also it might be interesting to see how many of the other local authorities in the NECA are actually not in the F40. And I think we need to point out, you know, because that's a good route about saying, I mean, they're levelling up is the word. Well, if they actually mean that they want to level up, they should be actually moving everybody in the North East out of the F40.
So we'll put that, with the support of the committee, we'll put that in as the recommendation. Chris will write that up, and that will go to Cabinet, and we've got Guy Renner-Thompson who will be at that Cabinet meeting, and I'm sure he will press the case for the importance of this. We've got a yes from him. That's on camera. There we go. Marvellous. Right, so thank you very much to everyone for that. Very, very, I think, detailed report, and well done to everyone. So we're now going to move on to item number 6 on the agenda, which is the performance and financial report. Again, it's a regular report. It's on pages 43 to 56. And Alan Hartwell is going to be taking that report. Over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Yes, as the Chair referenced, this is the 6-monthly report in a familiar format. Chair, if I can just allude to the previous report that this meeting has heard, and also the report that follows mine, just about where this report sits within context. A lot of the education and skills data that's within this report that I'm speaking to has already been referred to within the presentation that Audrey gave, and also within the discussions that took place. The report that's following mine, which Brian is going to present, that is also a benchmarking report that looks at benchmarking data. The difference is that this report that I'm presenting looks very specifically at the quarter ending December 2022, and it looks at a very specific set of performance indicators that are within the service statements for children's social care and for education and skills. And following the request that elected members made previously, what it does focus on is the information that's at the far right of the appendices, which is the comparison against the national averages. I know that we have heard quite a lot of information already about comparison against the national averages, but that's why this report is sat within that context. The information in terms of the headlines really from this report are that the information within the appendices shows that compared to the national average, Northumberland at the end of December within its Children's Services Department, it was performing better on 15 of those indicators, around the same on 3 of them, and poorer on 11. And the report provides detail in terms of what those indicators are and the actions that are being taken on the areas where a national average is available and where the end of December performance is poorer than the national average. I think it is worth saying that in terms of the highlights from the report, as colleagues have said previously, Northumberland is currently in a position where more children are learning within good or outstanding schools than was ever the position before, a real positive. The external scrutiny that Children's Services in Northumberland has received over the last year has been positive. There was a positive focused visit. The Children's Social Care Self-Assessment, which this team previously received back in September, demonstrated the positive and a broad range of very effective work that was taking place across the department. And also, as you've already heard, the Director's annual education report also provides a very positive picture as well. In terms of, Chair, if I can just bring out some of the highlights from this particular report, and as I did say, this is very much specifically about a key set of performance indicators at a particular point in time at December 2022. Really, the highlights that I would pull out is that elected members that will see that within children's social care and with reference to Appendix A, what we're seeing within that is that proportionately more children who are looked after in the care system return home following that episode than is the case nationally. That's a positive. What we do know from data from around our workforce, and I know this committee received previous information about the challenges around recruitment and retention and sat within the national context, that's a real challenge. Yesterday we received benchmarking data from the latest workforce return, and that is showing that, yes, staff turnover is a challenge within Northumberland's children's social care, but it's proving it's actually even more of a challenge nationally. Northumberland's latest figure, 15.9%, it actually sits better than the latest national figure, which we saw yesterday, which was over 17%. We rely far less on agency workers within Northumberland's children's social care than is the national average. We have lower vacancy rates and the sickness levels are less as well. Within the Education and Skills Service, I'll not go into detail around that because a lot of those areas have already been covered within Audrey's presentation. We have an outstanding level of take-up of the 2-year-old offer with regards to education entitlement. We have relatively low figures of young people who are not in employment education and whose destination is unknown. That's better than the national average. It's almost 1% better than the national average, and bearing in mind that those figures are always very low, Northumberland's latest figure of actually the end of January figure was 5.1%, and compared to a national average of 6%, given the economic context that we're working in, that's a real positive as well. And even about some of the areas where we've heard about where there are challenges, for example, permanent exclusions, the report that you've received here does make reference to things like what we're doing around managed moves and the interventions of the inclusion support workers, and about a lot of the permanent exclusions that have actually been prevented by the impact of the staff who've been working with the schools and with the pupils and families on those areas. I think that probably covers it in terms of really the highlights coming out of the report. Happy to take any questions in terms of the technical detail around some of the performance indicators, and Audrey, Graham and David would be happy to speak around, to provide professional judgment around some of the context and some of the actions that are being taken.
So thank you very much, Alan. And can I just say that I really do appreciate that RAG rating, that red, amber, green, because that gives us a really good visual impact of what's happening and that comparator, which I know that many members actually discuss. So I'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Ball.
Thank you. So one quick question I do have with regards to Ofsted visits. We keep saying how good, outstanding schools are. When was the last time that these schools had an inspection? Because if they were 5 years ago, obviously we've seen a number of changes in them 5 years. It doesn't really stack up. That was still celebrating stuff that happened 5 years ago. And how many of these visits were actually unplanned? Because it's amazing how tidy your house can be when you know visitors are coming, but when somebody turns up unexpected, it might not be the full story.
The Ofsted framework is getting quicker and quicker. There is a direct effort by Ofsted to ensure some schools, for example, some outstanding schools that are basically legacy outstanding schools, which could be a significant number of years ago, they are catching up with the re-inspection of those schools. In the intervening time, even though we're all easily aware of what the particular judgment for any one school might be at any one time, as far as Ofsted are concerned, as soon as officers, if we look at the performance of a particular school, yes, we'll reflect on that, but as soon as, absolutely says, by the time it's 3-4 years beyond that, then actually how much of that is relevant to what's happening today, and then we'd refer much more directly back to either the school improvement partner reports or other information and knowledge that we get through working with the schools in order to highlight if there was a school that we're having some challenges, for example. And there are other things beyond Ofsted reports, so exclusion rates as an example, attendance rates that we get virtually live, but things not necessarily that would indicate there's a massive problem, but if there was a number of indicators that were heading in the wrong direction, then obviously we would have a conversation with that school, whatever its type, in order to try and ask if they needed some additional support, or if we were already supporting them, we'd know it well, and we were trying to put those things into support. So the Ofsted data can be a little bit misleading over time, but they are definitely shortening that time scale. There shouldn't be any schools. The aim of Ofsted is that there will be no schools beyond the 5-year. And the other element to that is that schools will be brought forward in the framework if there are concerns highlighted about those schools. So if there was some safeguarding concerns reported to Ofsted, they would bring them forwards. If there was a massive drop in academic outcomes, Ofsted do regular desktop analysis of how the schools are performing. We also meet with Ofsted regional representatives on a termly basis, and we discuss the great things that are going on, and we also discuss some where there are some particular challenges as well. And that relationship, I think, has been really effective in terms of us both sharing information that we've got. And sometimes it means Ofsted will go a bit earlier, and sometimes it might mean they might step off a little bit for legitimate reasons. It's still their decision that they set the framework. And in terms of preparation, the phone call comes probably between 12 and 1 the day before. And immediately, so that 2 o'clock-ish, there is a 90-minute conversation with the lead inspector and the leadership of the school live there and then. So if they're not on it before that point, there's very little opportunity to turn things around in that time scale.
Thank you for that, David. Sorry, Graham, you wanted to come in.
Just in terms of children's social care, for the main inspection, we're going to get 5 working days notice, and during that 5 days leading up to the inspection, we've got to provide shed loads of information to Ofsted prior to that visit. But the framework for social care has evolved over time. So whilst we get an inspection visit every 3 years, and we will be due one this year, Ofsted have aimed to have other contact with us, so we had our focus visit, as you're well aware of, last year. We also have an annual conversation with them, which is due next week. So they are on top of what, they get as much information regularly as we could do, but actually trying to put your house in order in 5 working days, given the nature of the work we do, that wouldn't happen and couldn't happen. So it really is about the quality of what you do ongoing and your oversight of that.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Fellis-Ake and then Councillor Dale.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I read it with interest. Thank you very much. I was looking at on page 51, the reference to the EHCP plans within 20 weeks, which is an ambitious task, I'm sure. And you mentioned timeliness. And I was wondering if you'd at all, I mean, I've been interested, I looked into the software that Cumbria is currently looking at in relation to speeding this process up. So there's the new eye scanning software for children, L'Explores one, it's a Swedish company, and I know two first schools are sort of investing in that software, which essentially takes the time to diagnose a child and put the ECHP plan into place in a much shorter, you know, these things can take, as you see, 20 weeks, a term, 2 terms, 3 terms for a teacher, and sometimes that child's not going to be at that school that long. And I'm just wondering if there's any way we could, or have you looked into those softwares and new technologies that allow this to be speeded up literally within sort of days compared to terms?
I think Audrey can come in on that one, on a very technical answer.
So yes, we are looking at software, but also the green paper that I referenced earlier is also talking about having a national digital system. So that is the ambition, that is the aim. It would be brilliant if that were the case. It's much more than just the software. So the biggest challenge for all education healthcare plans is the availability and accessibility of education psychologists to do the statutory review part of that. And that for us is our biggest challenge in Northumberland, increasing volume and decreasing amounts of availability around education psychologists to complete that.
Very good question, though. Councillor Dale.
Yep. Thank you very much, and thank you for that. I do find these rags really good because it didn't get the meat to it. Can I just ask you, I was just going to say about the Ofsted, and you know, it has always been, I think, I can't remember how long ago, it would be 5 years ago or more, when the government made the decision that they wouldn't go into outstanding schools for quite a long time. And in a way, you know, I'm not sure that that's terribly good. I think we're quite lucky in the fact that our first schools have always been have been good or outstanding. They've always had a really good, strong tradition. It's the middle schools and the high schools that I find are more interesting in the fact that you might have a high school, as far as I can remember, has never been good since I've been on the council. It's a long time. And so I think what I would like to see is all these benchmarking is those particular areas where, I mean, I've got I've got children who go to a really good school, another one goes to a really good school, but there's middle schools that aren't good performing, or there's high schools that aren't good performing, and I really would like to know what impact you have as a council into changing things, because I think that's difficult because if they're in a trust, you know, you've got a difficult management scenario there. So basically, it would be quite nice, because I think it'd be interesting when we're doing our inequalities work, is actually looking at what the council can do, which there's a lot of, it all runs together. You know, if you've got some trouble in school, or you've got trouble in inequalities in the area, etc. So it's a really good issue to take on board. So people who are working on inequalities might support. So when we're going into areas, looking at the school and looking at this type of information is always helpful.
I mean, I think on the inequalities point, I would assume, making an assumption here, that as part of that work which the council's involved in, that we would calibrate school and education performance in there, because that would be sensible to do so. I think I think that was your fundamental point, wasn't it, really? That,
yes, and also the things about the whole thing comes together. And part of I
think that goes back to Paul Rickard's point earlier on about having a presentation about that big picture that we do. So I think that's a piece of work which
take it to the inequalities working group, because that can be area based, and I think that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, good. So Audrey King.
Thank you. Just one final point. So yeah, that is a long decision around, it is a long while ago, sorry, the decision to not inspect and to extend the range. In fact, it's quite the opposite now in Ofsted of focusing on our outstanding schools, and we're seeing that more and more. Nationally, there are a number of reports out where outstanding schools are perhaps not performing at the rate that they were. That isn't the case in Northumberland, so let me be clear about that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So, again, this is a report which comes to us regularly. I can't see any other comments from any members. So we're asked to note the current performance and how it compares against the benchmarking. I've just got one question. That RAG rating, which is on there, I am assuming that that is the... we will use that as to determine our work plan. So anything that's green, great, let's keep it going. Anything that's amber, we need to do a bit of work to turn it green, and all the stuff that's red is where we need to focus on the laser beam. So that's a really good tool. I quite like those, and I'm sure I'm seeing lots of nods from members there. So
Dovetails with our education priorities.
Brilliant. So thank you very much. So again, that's part of the assurance that we get as a scrutiny committee this morning. Right, so thank you very much, Alan, for that. Much appreciated. We're now moving on to item number 7, which is on pages 57 to 70 of your report, which is Safeguarding Activity Trends and Benchmarking Report. Brian Smeaton is going to be taking that report. So, Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So the purpose of the report is to look at the trends with regards to activity and the key performance indicators in terms of safeguarding children in Northumberland. It uses benchmarking data from the annual returns that we submit to the Department for Education, so that we've got the latest national and regional figures within the report to compare ourselves to. So the report starts off by describing the front door within Northumberland. This is the single point of contact for any child safeguarding concerns. In terms of the numbers of referrals that have been received in Northumberland, these have been fairly consistent over the last few years, with any variations kind of being explained by school holiday periods. Excuse me. Most of our referrals within Northumberland come from the police, with the second highest number coming from colleagues in health. So these tend to be GPs or health visitors. And the third highest amount comes from what we label as individuals. And these are relatives, friends and neighbours of the children of families or anonymous referrals. So just under 1/3 of those referrals convert to what we call social work referrals. And the key indicator within the front door looks at the proportion of these referrals that are referred within 12 months, or re-referrals. And this figure has improved in Northumberland across 2022 to 15%, and that's much better than the national and regional figures. And we're seeing that as a real strength in Northumberland, that children and families are seeing the right service at the right time, and the circumstances that lead to a case being closed is sustained, essentially. The vast majority of those referrals lead to a child and family assessment, which is done by a social worker. And the expectation around those assessments is that they're completed within 45 working days. This has been a bit of a challenge within 2022 due to social worker sickness and the availability or lack of availability of agency social workers to cover. And you'll notice in the graph that Q2 figure dipped and Q3 figure dipped as well, but I'm pleased to say that it recovered a bit in Q4. Where there's suspected that a child is suffering significant harm, then a Section 47 inquiries is initiated, and this is essentially a multi-agency assessment. And 59% of those Section 47s converted to initial child protection conferences. This is higher than the national and regional figures, but we've done some audits to look at those thresholds, and we're satisfied that where a case is escalated, that is appropriate. In terms of the numbers of children, the numbers of the proportion of initial child protection conferences that convert to child protection plans, 84% of those conferences, of those children end up with a child protection plan. And that's slightly below the national and regional pictures. Sorry, I'll just have to refer to my notes. And of those children who ended up with a child protection plan, 24% had previously had a child protection plan. And it's generally accepted that circumstances within families do and will change over time. So a figure of between 20 and 25% is deemed to be a good performance on this indicator. In terms of child protection plans ending, again, there's an expectation that a child protection plan should be concluded within 2 years, and as this is ample time for the risk to be reduced for the child. And in Northumberland, only 2% of those child protection plans that ended in 2022 lasted more than 2 years, which again compares favourably to the national picture. In terms of numbers of children in care, the numbers did increase across 2022 from around 400 to 442 at the end of December. Despite the increase, the rate per 10,000 for when you equate the numbers to the under 18 child population, the rate for Northumberland is actually the lowest in the region, and it's just slightly higher than the national picture. We've looked into the reasons behind this, and it seems to be a slowdown in terms of children exiting care, especially with regards to children who've been adopted or made subject to a special guardianship order. And these are legal processes that are linked to court timetables, which were affected during the pandemic. Despite that, the proportion of children who have been adopted or made subject to a special guardianship order across 2022, those figures are still higher than the national averages. One area that's a particular challenge within Northumberland is placement stability, and both of those indicators are worse than the national averages. But we have done some audits to look at that, and over half of the placement moves were for favourable reasons, i.e. the child moving to a long-term foster carer or returning home. And just to finish off, the report also outlines 13 indicators, outcome indicators from the national data return that we submit to the Department for Education, and 11 of those indicators are performing better than the national average. And I'll gladly attempt to answer any questions you have.
Brian, thank you very much for that very comprehensive report. And again, liking the graphics in there. I think they really help tell the story. Do I have any questions? Councillor Ball.
Just a quick one on page 67, when it says about the contacts with the link workers. What is a level of contact that would be expected over the course of the year? Is it monthly? I'm just wondering because obviously we've got 100% of care leavers aged 17 and 18, but if that's a text message or an email, it's not a meaningful contact. So I'm just wondering what level there. And also it's on the same page 67 where it's about employment, education and training. 17 and 18-year-olds, 70% of care leavers, but then that drops when they turn 19 down to 57%. That's quite a substantial drop, and I'm just wondering if there's been any research done on the back of that, because I know in other circumstances when you reach 19 it may affect household incomes, whether you are in work or not. So some people may be encouraged not to work because of them challenges. I'm just wondering if there's been any bit of a dive into the reasons between the figures of 17 to 18 and the 19 to 21. Thank you.
In terms of the meaningful contact, a lot of the care leavers are in touch every 3 months, and we do make sure that it's not just a text message or anything like that. There's usually a visit or at least a phone call involved.
And just to take that a bit further, whenever we look at the data, and if the things that stand out, then we will look at those in other qualitative ways of our practice. So, for example, on practice days, where I and my senior colleagues, we sit alongside social workers with case sample, we do effectively what Ofsted do in terms of looking at that, as well as case audits. The quality and the strength of that relationship, I think, is a real positive for us with our care leavers. We've got a team of personal advisors who maintain that contact and are very tenacious about ensuring that they maintain contact with those care leavers as far as possible, taking into account the care leavers' wishes, but actually we're very tenacious in ensuring they're supported. And on occasions, if we are concerned about them and the care leaver doesn't want direct contact, we'll make sure that we're checking out their well-being with people around them who may well have contact with them as well.
I've got Councillor Dale.
Sorry, mine was just a question to ask to move forward. Obviously, the figures, they're pretty average ongoing. Can you break those down, if required, to various areas? So could we say that, it could be that actually it's a rural problem, it could be urban, it could be an area of deprivation, where those problems are, where the more referrals come from? And because those could work with the work on the schools, etc., and the whole big picture. It's just to add into the big picture. It's rather like asking about vouchers. How many, 97,000 vouchers, which areas are they being given to? So it's just getting a bigger picture of activity within certain areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can and we do break down by geographical areas, and we cut that across and compare with our education data where we can, and other wider data. Indices of multiple deprivation, we'll also look at those. There's a range of ways in which we can cut the information depending on what the need is and how we'd want to look at it.
Just as inequalities is one of the challenges that can be fed into the working group.
Yeah, we certainly have. We've got examples where we've looked at data in relation to young people in care and achievements and other things, and how that links across to deprivation. We've certainly got that information.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Councillor Dunbar.
Sorry, I forgot about that all the time. So paragraph 30, page 66. Fantastic that we are up nationally and regionally regarding immunisations for children. The assessments for health is absolutely fantastic, 97%. Fantastic that 81% of children under 5 are assessed for the development compared nationally to 89 and 95. I'd like to see a bit of improvement or discussion about that. But what I'm really concerned about is the teeth being checked, the dentists. I know there's a problem nationally with NHS dentists, a lot of private dentists aren't taking on national health. Would or does our authority, or would be prepared to go private with some of these children to get the teeth checked? Because I think that most when children are in a deprived situation and being taken to care, I think one of the main things is teeth. They don't get the teeth checked, adequately. So, answer, please. Thank you.
Awareness of the lack of availability of dental services in particular areas as well. So we have undertaken a specific piece of work with our colleagues in health who undertake the assessments reviews to make sure we're maximising and getting our looked after young people to get those checked. So I would hope that percentage increases the next time that we would look at that, because we've done some specific work around that in terms of either travelling to or making sure that they get those checks. We haven't gone privately, but we have ensured that they would be getting checks from other areas of the county if they couldn't get them in the locality in which they're living.
So you wouldn't think about...
We haven't needed to.
You haven't needed to yet?
Because we're able to get that through the links that our health colleagues have in terms of getting those checks completed.
Thank you.
And actually on that point, I was going to raise this in any other business, but every member of this committee has an invite to the public health report, which is Healthy Weight for Children, which is on Tuesday of next week, the 7th of March, That's at 2 o'clock here in the chamber. The meeting starts at 1, but this particular section is at 2 o'clock that we've been invited to. And I believe that there's a section there on oral health as well, is that right?
Yeah, so the first item on the health agenda at 1 o'clock will be an update from NHS England on dental provision in Northumberland. So if members want to come for 1 o'clock, they're more than welcome to listen to that item.
So basically the invite's there from 1 o'clock on Tuesday for that. Mr Hodgson, and then we'll draw this to a close.
Any data about looked after children or children in care as far as the health report was concerned there? And on these things, although it says 97% of the children in care have an annual health assessment, that's fine, but what were the results of it? Are we finding there are any issues with that in terms of obesity and other health associated issues?
And I'd need to check back on the data, but we would get an annual report which would go to corporate parenting around the assessment, from the health perspective, in terms of our children who are looked after and what the findings and trends may be. So we do look at that, and on an individual basis, through the reviewing processes that we would have for our children who are looked after, if there were particular health issues for those individually, obviously those would be addressed and met through the individual processes. But the health report would identify if there were wider trends for our children looked after population.
I'm not seeing any other indication of anyone wanting to speak, so I think we can welcome that report. I think we've had a good discussion on it. Brian, thank you very much for presenting that to us this morning. We're now moving on the agenda to item number 8, which is the standing item, the work programme. Chris Angus, you're going to take us through pages 71 to 82.
Thanks, Chair. There isn't much on the work programme that I wanted to raise. There's one meeting left in this council year. So the work programme is just to note, and I will bring the one for 23-24 to the next meeting so members can see what we have planned for the next year. But if there's any suggestions, as always, just to drop me a line.
Thank you very much for that. Again, just a reminder, the public health report, oral health is at 1 o'clock, the healthy weight for children, 2 o'clock, and that's here in the council chamber on Tuesday the 7th of March. So thank you very much to everyone for their time this morning, and we'll see you at the next meeting. So thank you very much.